在四维黄 amongst or in colors, it is this yellow color. That's that bilirubin color. And so it's what gives, that's actually what gives flesh its characteristic color. Not the blood that's flowing through. It's not the blood that's flowing through that gives flesh that reddish, orange color. It's the bilirubin that's in the tissues that gives it that color there. And that bilirubin, it primarily derives from the hemoglobin that comes from, that's broken down. If that makes sense. Are there any other questions? Yes.
So what can someone do to support the spleen if, say, they live in the Pacific Northwest, have rheumatoid arthritis,
Right.
are always tired,
Yeah.
chronically stressed?
Yeah. Well, that's a very good question. So they're basically what we can call kind of lifestyle things that support the spleen. Just getting regular rest and digestion. If you look at the model of the snake, it eats and then it won't eat again for a couple of months. It just sits there. It pretty much does nothing. It just maybe lies in the sun. If it gets a little too hot, it will go into the shade. And it just stays as comfortable as it can on a tree branch or whatever, just someplace it can relax and just digest and really gets everything that it can out of the food there. When you think about the way the spleen is so closely related to the humoral immune system and how the ability of the humoral immune system to regulate itself is dependent on the spleen's ability to kind of survive well or kind of flourish, then the spleen, it grows, it actually prospers, it flourishes after a meal when you're resting and digesting. But if you eat a meal and then you go and work on a project or run all over Egypt trying to find something or whatever, the spleen isn't going to have an opportunity to do that, and its processes aren't going to be kind of well organized. Also, adequate sleep. If you think about the spleen, kind of its relationship, I guess, with serotonin and with with platelets and with all that, just getting adequate sleep so that your serotonin can replenish itself probably would support the spleen. In Chinese medicine, the main ways to sort of get spleen qi deficiency is to be overactive, to eat irregularly, and to sleep irregularly, and to work too hard, especially mental, kind of emotional type of strain where you're worrying and thinking about projects and all those things. All those things cause the spleen to become deficient. So avoiding all of those things and just having adequate time to just sort of play and relax and all those things, that allows kind of the spleen to recreate itself and just through kind of recreation. Those are lifestyle things. And then in Chinese medicine, there are a number of herbs that are specifically for the spleen. They help in either getting rid of damp, or they help to augment the functions of the spleen and whatnot. But for that, you really need to be diagnosed. They need to see if that was actually sort of the crux of whatever your particular problem was, and then they could kind of address that with an appropriate formula. But staying dry, I think even just like going out in the sun, getting kind of the bright light on you and whatnot, and keeping things orderly so you can actually kind of relax, but not stressing about things being orderly, if that makes sense. Living simply, I think, is one of the main things with the spleen, this notion of simplicity. The spleen is like sometimes it's associated with this sort of like off-white color of like just like homespun cotton or homespun wool, where it hasn't been dyed or anything like that. But that notion of just like really simple fare, kind of simple clothing, not pursuing all these ambitious things that tend to wear you out and just put you through the emotional ringer, but just kind of keeping things really close to home, down to earth. Those all allow you to relax. I don't know if that answers your question. And as far as the rheumatologic element goes, there is sort of an autoimmune element to that, and so it becomes tricky because if you try to just boost the immunity, you might get a flare-up of the autoimmune disorder. And that the pathogen of damp is probably one of the most problematic in Chinese medicine, because dampness really, it's this combination of the water on this side And here we have the kind of the breakdown of the tissues, but it also has this fire aspect to it. So the flow of water isn't working well, and then you get this sort of inflammation. But in Chinese medicine, damp, the pathogenic damp, it's not just water. It's not like cool, clean water that's making the damp. It's dampness with heat mixed into it, so it becomes sort of sticky and whatnot. When you think about a swamp, you have all these materials decaying, all these carbon chains and larger constructs, maybe tiny small dead insects decaying. As they decay, they're producing a certain amount of heat. They're kind of composting. And then in addition to that, you have the damp. So if you try to dry out the dampness, a lot of times you'll end up introducing more heat. And if you try to cool down the heat, a lot of times you'll end up introducing more fluid. So it becomes kind of a sticky problem there. But Qigong, I think, is really helpful. And there are a number of things that people do. I would see that. Oh, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Yes.
A question about, I don't know if you have the answer to this, but if people, their children nowadays are so stimulated by computer games and the television, do you think you see like an overall spleen deficiency in them?
I don't know about that, but I think when we think about this concept of this, I mean, my guess would be yes, you know, in answer to that. The other thing is our overall kind of basal, right now, it used to be, when I was a kid, normal body temperature was 98.6 degrees. That was normal body temperature. Now, normal body temperature, if we see somebody in the clinic that has 98.6, we ask them what their normal body temperature is, because they may have a low-grade fever. Now I think the new normal is 97.9 degrees Fahrenheit. So why is that? I think the reason why that is because we're always sort of doing stuff and stimulating. We're always under this sort of mild, sort of sympathetic stimulation. When you think about this, needing all this color and stimulation, not having our own kind of imagination, the picture of Si is like somebody sitting down in a quiet place with just a book and reading the book. It's like nice and dry. Books, the one thing they don't like is damp. Reading the book and imagining all of this stuff and learning from them. But nowadays, it's all about, you know, you use a computer, you learn a little of this and a little of that, or you're playing video games like this constant stimulation. So that ability to serve this imaginative quality, which is very much related to the spleen, has become very, I think, neglected. It's like a faculty that we're no longer exercising. There is a study at the turn of the century. They used to show school children pictures, and then they would take them away, and then they would ask them, what color was the button on the cat's shirt? You know, what did the man have in his hand? What kind of fruit was there in the trees? And kids could answer all of the questions. It was the standard that children, anyhow, could look at that, look at the picture once, and you could ask them questions, and they could answer them. But now what they're finding is children, for the most part, can't do that. You show them a picture, you take it away, they can't remember most of the details. And as we age, and especially when our spleens become deficient, even as the day wears on and our serotonin levels drop, you show somebody a picture and they turn it away, you're going to have more and more difficulty remembering what was in that picture, any of those details. I personally think a lot of that probably has to do both with nutrition and kind of lifestyle things. But nutrition and kind of the overall state of our gastrointestinal tract and whatnot has a lot to do with the functioning of our mind, the production of neurotransmitters, you know, our ability to remember and put things to memory that are all closely associated with the spleen and Chinese medical thought.
Thank you.
Yes?
Could you name some foods that most nourish to the spleen?
I'm glad you brought that up. If you read any of Henry C. Liu's books, and I agree with his analysis, one of the most important things is just having a simple but hot breakfast every day at a regular time. And he very much espouses eating what's called Joe. This is Joe here. Joe, which is what you do is you take rice and you